All right. I think we still have a few folks joining, but I think we can probably get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on enabling mission critical applications with SingleStore as part of the fall release and fall announcement that we have coming up. My name is Vijay. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at SingleStore, and I'll be your moderator for today. Before we begin, just a few logistical reminders. Uh, Today's session is being recorded and you are currently in a listen-only mode. You may submit questions throughout the session using the Q&A function in the lower right-hand corner of your console. We will answer everyone's question after the presentation. And after today's webinar, you will receive an email with the recording. If you wish to contact us, please email us at team@singlestore.com. With that, let's jump in. So just to give you some context, back in summer, so if you can go to the next slide, Eric. Great, thank you. So just to give everyone some context here, back in summer in June, we announced the launch of industry's first modern cloud database to power data-intensive applications. Okay, and what we offer is a distributed cloud-native modern relational database that's designed to run both analytical as well as operational workloads, both with great performance. So in some ways, if you think about it, we kind of bring together the best of both worlds. Super fast transactions and lookup of an operational database together with the scalable analytics of a data warehouse. And the best part is, it's a multimodal database, which means it can handle multiple data types all in the same database, including relational data, JSON, geospatial, time series, and full text search, which means customers don't have to, stitch together multiple different specialty databases to power their applications or analytics. And in the summer, we announced the introduction of a set of key features, including separation of storage and compute, which lets users effortlessly scale compute to meet the need of any workload, independent of the storage. We also announced enhancements to our patented universal storage engine, which combines row store and column store into a new table type, delivering speed and performance that was not possible before. We also introduced a slew of new features as part of 7.5, including in summer, including things such as suspend and resume, new security capabilities, so on and so forth. So that is all part of our 7.5 release, or summer release or announcement back in June. Now in November, we just had our fall release or announcement, and we introduced a whole set of new features specifically to support mission critical applications. And that's what we are going to be covering today. Okay, next slide. So what we are going to be covering today is around, okay, what's new in the fall release or fall announcement that we have just released. But before that, let me introduce our speakers for today. We are very excited to have both Micah Bhakti and Eric Hansen from our product management team join us to cover what's new in the fall release. So as part of the agenda today, we'll talk about, okay, what's new, what are some of the new things that just came out as part of our fall release or announcement. We'll talk about 3 new product additions that we launched recently, and what is included in each, and what does that mean for you. And most importantly, we'll talk about new features for mission critical to power your mission critical applications, including things such as point in time restore, multi-AZ failover, and a slew of other features. Most interestingly, though, we also have a demo for you that'll showcase how we do PITR and why it's unique. We will still have time for Q&A, so as you have questions as we go through the session, please add your questions to that console on the far right corner. And we should have a lot, get your coffee, get your drink ready, and then we should have a good session today. With that, let me hand this over to Mike and Eric. So, so Eric, if you're ready, you now have the floor.
Great, thank you. So before we launch into what's new in this fall announcement, I wanted to first give a little bit of background for some people who may be new to SingleStore. So it's the industry's first cloud database that's built for data-intensive applications. It's an extremely scalable relational SQL database. It has things that you expect from a database like atomic transactions, ANSI SQL. We've got a large ecosystem. It's cloud native, it's distributed, supports high availability built in. It has separation of storage and compute as a capability for managing your storage. And as Vijay mentioned, we support all different types of data. We have a sort of a unified approach to managing data, including relational, document, key value, time series, geospatial, full text, some streaming capabilities, all accessible through a single API and accessible via SQL. We're optimized for data intensity. And so a data intensive application is an application that has at least a few of these elements. Like it has large data, high velocity, like rapid ingest, high concurrency, some demanding analytical capabilities or demanding analytical queries happening on the data. If it's got some subset of those, probably more than one, then it's, if your application is probably data intensive. It's a very high performance system. It supports parallel ingestion of data, parallel query processing, vectorization, which is basically with column store data, we can process data in batches in a very streamlined fashion, processing vectors of data at a time in a way that allows us to process each row with very few instructions to get higher scan and join performance, for example. It's lock-free. Readers and writers don't block each other. Supports multi-version concurrency control. We use single instruction, multiple data instructions to speed up certain operations during query processing. Can support all kinds of storage devices like NVMe devices. We compress data as it's stored for efficient and economical use of storage space. And we have fast distributed joins and so on. So it's a really high performance scalable database system that handles multiple different data types. It's a multi-model system, as Vijay said. So just a quick overview of our distributed processing architecture. Those of you who are used to legacy database systems know that everything is stored on a single node typically. We have a different approach where we shard the data across multiple nodes called leaf nodes into multiple partitions. So each partition is sort of like a separate miniature database that has its own log file for transaction processing, and the data is hash partitioned across those partitions. Each leaf may have multiple partitions, typically say one partition per core, maybe one partition for every 2 or 4 cores, depending on how you want to configure it. And when a client connects to our system, whether that's a command line program for you to issue ad hoc SQL, or a client application that's issuing SQL that it's generated or that's embedded in the application, it connects to a front-end node called the aggregator node, submits the SQL, and the aggregator node, if necessary, will compile that query and then farm out pieces of it to the leaf nodes during processing, and then get responses back from one or more leaf nodes and compose the final result and send that back to the client. So This kind of architecture has been around for a long time, but the thing that's unique about SingleStore is we use the same architecture both for transaction processing and analytics. There's been a number of analytical systems that use this architecture and a number of transaction processing systems historically that have done it. We're really the first and only that does both. So we've got, as I alluded to, there are some foundations in this system that are key for mission critical application support. And you heard us say that in this fall announcement, we're adding some new mission critical capabilities, but we've been working for many years to make SingleStore a database that is suitable and great for mission critical applications. So here are some of the foundations that were already here before the fall announcement. So we supported transactions for a very long time. You can begin a transaction, do a series of operations, and commit or roll back the transaction atomically. High availability is built into SingleStore. There's what we call a redundancy 2 architecture, where each partition has 2 different copies on 2 different leaf nodes. So if you lose any one node in the cluster, any one leaf node, you will not lose access to data. It'll be completely online with no downtime. You'll be able to continue accessing your data. We support millisecond latency. So if you've got a mission critical transactional application, you expect very quick interactive response time for small queries that are just retrieving, say, 1 or 2 rows, and we provide that. We can give sub-millisecond latency for certain types of queries. Very different from the data warehouse databases that are strictly for analytics. We support online operations like online alter table to add a new column, for example. Online index creation, all that is standard. Monitoring and alerting is built in. Got various types of authentication and authorization capability, including the ability to use Kerberos style authentication if you want to, or use our built-in authentication and authorization. Got a permissions model for you to grant and revoke permissions for users and groups and roles. We've got numerous security certifications, for example, HIPAA and GDPR certifications for our managed service. We support encryption. In our managed service, all data is encrypted at rest, and we support encryption of connections between clients and the cluster. And if you like, you can encrypt all data traffic even within the cluster using SSL connections. We support stored procedures and people building all kinds of apps, but in particular, mission critical or transactional apps may want to encode procedural logic in a unit in the database in a stored procedure and call it from a client and reduce the traffic between the client and the server that way and get higher performance for transactional type operations for the business logic and the application. And we support disaster recovery as well. So we've had these foundations for quite a while, and now we're adding more. So in 2021, these are some of the top mission critical requirements that we addressed. One was reduced TCO for large row store oriented transactional applications. So for years, we had heard that people wanted to use SingleStore for larger databases than would fit in RAM. They loved our sort of transactional capabilities that we provided with our row store table type, very fast individual row update and lookup, very fast ingest, fast upserts. But they wanted to use this on databases that were bigger than they could afford to provision RAM in order to run the application. So that motivated us to implement what we call universal storage, which was delivered in 4 installments culminating last summer with the last summer announcement. And so now universal storage is the default table type. And it's an evolution of our column store technology to handle all kinds of workloads, both transactional and analytical workloads. So I include it as a mission critical requirement because people wanted to use SingleStore for mission critical apps where there was more data than would fit in RAM. And so people don't always think of it as mission critical, but I kind of think of it as mission critical for that reason. And then we've added support for point-in-time recovery. That was in preview. It was introduced in a preview fashion last summer. In this fall announcement that we just delivered a couple weeks ago, it is now generally available for production use. And we also support a fully online backup, and we'll say more about that in a later slide. So at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Micah to tell you a little bit more about what's new in this with the fall announcement. Micah, you want to take over?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Eric. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of the features that we've included in our fall announcement, and go through how they work and some of the benefits that they provide, and then I'll hand it back over to Eric. Eric will talk about a couple of the other things that we've introduced, and then show a live demo. So I'm going to start out with talking about the new product additions that we've introduced. So we've launched new product additions for SingleStore. We've got a couple of different additions, and I'll talk about the benefits that they provide. But each of these new additions is available both in the cloud with our managed service and on-prem with our self-managed SingleStore DB. And the reason that we've introduced new additions, we wanted to design these around customer workloads. And we've got some customers that have standard workloads for data intensive applications, and we have customers that have workloads that are mission critical, right? They're core to running the customer's business. So those could be customer facing applications, or they could be internal operational applications. But these are applications and services that they need to be running essentially 24/7 in order to do their day-to-day business. And so I'll talk a little bit about how the new premium offering that we've introduced supports those mission critical workloads, and then we'll go in depth on a number of the features that are kind of included in that premium edition. So these are the three SingleStore product editions that we've introduced. We've got standard, we've got premium, and we've got dedicated. And as I said, standard and premium are both available in our cloud with managed service and on-prem with SingleStore DB. And then dedicated is an offering that's just exclusive to our cloud product, but it provides a little bit of extra account isolation for customers in regulated industries. So typically that's reserved for some of our largest customers in the banking field. But what we kind of want to dig into is with standard and premium, what are the differences between these editions, and how do the features that we've introduced in premium enable mission critical applications. So you can see here, standard has all the features that kind of differentiate SingleStore. The ability to run hybrid transactional and analytical workloads, as Eric described. Some of our key features like separation of storage and compute, which we call unlimited storage, that allows you to scale up the compute or scale down the compute dynamically and separately from data being stored in object storage. And it's kind of unique in our implementation in that we've optimized it for these data intensive applications and operational applications to ensure that we don't give up low latency or scalability or our ability to deliver high concurrency with that separation of storage and compute. So it's kind of unique in the way that we've implemented it. And then again, our full ecosystem of compatibility with MySQL, wire compatibility, and driver compatibility allows us to integrate with the developer ecosystem and make it really easy to either build new applications on SingleStore or to migrate existing applications over from something like SQL Server, or Postgres, or MySQL onto SingleStore. And with standard, you get our standard support. We have kind of best-in-class support and also a 3.9 SLA, so 99.9% of availability of any clusters that you launch. So Premium builds on this. It has all the features that are included in standard, but we've added key capabilities that enable these mission-critical applications. So point-in-time recovery, resource governance, multi-AZ deployment, as well as audit logging, and we'll kind of dig into a couple of those and talk about how they work. And then you also get Silver support when you upgrade to Premium. So Silver support provides faster response times for support tickets. And then we also are able to deliver a 4.9 SLA, so 99.99% availability for those critical customer-facing or internal applications that are core to running your business. And then Dedicated has all the same features as Premium, but it adds the ability to enable customer managed encryption keys, and it also runs in an isolated per customer cloud account. So these are the additions that we've introduced, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the key features in there that differentiate them. So also, as I kind of highlighted, standard and Premium are both available in managed service on our cloud offering and for self-managed. And then Dedicated obviously is just available in our cloud service, and that's because it's the isolated cloud account that's only possible in the public cloud. And we've got details on our website too. So if you want to go to SingleStore.com, you can take a look at the additions that we have, and you can see kind of feature by feature which capabilities are included in each edition, the SLAs, and dig into the support levels and kind of understand what you get by running Premium versus standard. So the next thing I want to dig into is one of the key features in our Premium offering. We call it multi-availability zone failover. So SingleStore has high availability built in. Both our standard and Premium offerings have high availability. And SingleStore leverages the fact that we're a distributed clustered architecture. And so we copy the data multiple times within the cluster. And what that enables us to do is, if there's an underlying cloud instance failure or a hardware server failure on-prem, SingleStore can keep the cluster running and continue serving your workloads without taking any downtime. So it's kind of a unique capability that we get because of our clustered architecture. And what we've introduced with our Premium offering is the ability to replicate this data across multiple availability zones. So the cloud providers typically have within a region, they'll have zones which are all self-contained within separate data centers. So that even if an entire AWS data center is lost or an entire GCP data center is lost, you can still maintain availability of your cluster. And so this is kind of critical for delivering that 4.9 SLA and for delivering kind of the uptime that's required if you've got a 24/7 customer application or something that constantly needs to run for your business. So the way that we've implemented this, here you've got kind of a little diagram that shows our clustered architecture. And we're using a capability that we introduced called leaf fan-out failover. And so what that does, I mentioned that we replicate data multiple times within the cluster. Here in the diagram, you've got 4 nodes running within a SingleStore cluster, and you've got those nodes grouped into 2 availability groups, availability group 1 on the left and availability group 2 on the right. And you can see we don't just replicate data directly across. We've got an algorithm that essentially spreads that data out within the cluster. And this ensures that if a node is lost, if a node goes offline, the overall workload is distributed on as many nodes as you have available in the cluster. So as you grow the cluster, we add nodes and we dynamically kind of distribute the data. And so this ensures that you don't get hotspots in the event of a cloud instance failure or hardware failure. The workload kind of runs evenly. And then with premium, availability group 1 and availability group 2 are in separate AZs entirely. So completely protected from the failure, not just of an individual host instance or node, but from an entire data center outage. So this kind of allows you to get both maximum performance in the event of a cloud instance failure, but also incredible reliability and availability of your data, even in some of the most impactful cloud failure scenarios. So the next feature that we've added into our premium offering is our resource governor. So we have many customers that are running, these kind of mission critical applications. And while the database is kind of primarily serving this application, maybe it's a customer facing app that allows them to manage investments, or maybe it's a pricing application that customers log into in order to view ad space prices. Those are applications that our customers want to be always online. But they may have other workloads or other users that are accessing that data to do their day-to-day jobs. And what we've allowed with the resource governor is we've allowed users to create resource pools and to isolate those pools from each other. So if you've got a mission critical application running against your cluster, but you also want to do batch reporting, or you have an analyst that needs to run jobs against the working data set, in order to kind of inform some business decisions. You want to ensure that those other users and other applications connecting don't impact the overall compute and memory resources that you have reserved for your customer-facing application. And so resource pools essentially allow you to kind of define these, either with hard or soft limits, and to enforce kind of the overall performance and throughput of the cluster, even when you've got multiple users and multiple applications consuming that data simultaneously. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it back over to Eric, and he's going to talk a little bit about lock-free backup.
Thanks, Micah. Right, so lock-free backup is a feature that it's been in preview since last summer, and we've made it generally available for production use now. Before lock-free backup was introduced, we used to take a exclusive lock to start a backup, and it would cause all distributed update transactions to serialize behind that lock. And then when we could acquire the lock, we'd immediately let those transactions proceed again. So it wasn't a long pause, but it was a noticeable pause. And so some customers wanted to make sure that that process of starting a backup was completely online, so that these mission critical applications that they were running would not see any noticeable pause in sort of a transactional style workload during creation of a backup. So now in 7.6, which is the version number of this fall release, that if you run select adac memsql _ version, you'll see 7.6. We talk about it as the fall release, so you'll see us de-emphasize these version numbers. But in this release, we now do not take any exclusive lock when starting a backup. Instead, we create a transaction consistent synchronization point to start the backup using a new technology called global versioning. And basically, this is a system that uses synchronized clocks between the leaf nodes on the cluster that are synchronized down to a fraction of a millisecond to help keep the work in sync, and other synchronization mechanisms, so that when we start a backup, we'll get the backup, a transaction consistent backup. So we'll see only committed data in the backup. We won't see any partially committed transactions. And here's a qualitative sort of diagram to see sort of the before and after kind of feel of what things will be like when you're running distributed update transactions. So the distributed update transaction throughput before when we would have to take that lock, and the workload would have to pause, at that time for just a fraction of a second, but all the distributed update transactions would have to block at that point. Now, when you start the backup, at time 0, there's no blocking. So it'd be more like the red line, the after line, than the blue line that's the before line. And again, this is just qualitative. And next, let me tell you about point-in-time recovery. We call it limitless point-in-time recovery because you can set your backup history to keep around as much history as you want. So that's a setting that you can control. You could set it to be a year or more if you really wanted to, because we're able to keep around all the data that's ever been created or deleted in a remote object store underneath your database. So this point-in-time recovery feature is a long requested feature for mission critical workloads. It's probably the most requested feature for mission critical workloads over the last 3 years or so. And it allows you to recover to a time or a milestone name. So you can create a milestone if you want and recover to that milestone, or just recover to a time. You may want to create a milestone before important events, like before deploying an application upgrade. It'd be a good idea to create a milestone. And then if something goes wrong, like the application had a bug in it that breaks your database or semantically corrupts the database, you could restore to the milestone you created right before you deployed the app. You don't have to do that. You can always use a point in time, but milestones are a convenient way to do it for those kind of situations where you're making a big change. So you can recover from logically corrupted data that may happen for many different possible reasons, like somebody might accidentally delete data, drop a table, truncate a table. They may load some data that's incorrect, like from a wrong file or something like that they already loaded, for example. And for any reason, you may semantically corrupt the data in the database. You can recover from that. You can recover from it using point-in-time recovery. So here are some of the relevant features that are related to point-in-time recovery. One is unlimited storage databases. This is required. So if you're using unlimited storage databases, you're storing your data in a remote object store as its permanent store, and the recent data, the data that's just been created or updated, and the tail of the log, all that is on the local drives on your cluster. But the long-term historical data is all out on object storage. It can be Google Cloud Storage, Azure Storage, S3 storage, or 100% S3 compatible storage. Like we work with the Ceph storage system, which is S3 compatible from Red Hat. It's an open source system. You can create milestone. You can create a milestone, as I mentioned, and then you can also detach a database and then attach it again. If you attach without any milestone or time mentioned, it just attaches the database at the latest point in time, the time at which it was detached. But you can also attach the database at a time or milestone. There's a management view and information schema called MV milestones that lists all the milestones that you created and when they were created. And then there's a setting called bottomless GC retention period minutes. It's a variable that you can set that sets your retention period of how long we're going to keep historical data around in the object store. And when data ages beyond that retention period, it gets garbage collected. So you can't restore to a point prior to the retention period. Or I would say beyond the current time minus the retention period. Anything before that you can't recover to. The way it's implemented, as I said, we store all your information out on the external object storage, including snapshots, write-ahead log files, and blob files that represent column store data. So snapshots contain row store data and column store metadata. The blobs contain column store column segments and column store dictionaries. And log files contain, we have a write-ahead log where we log data before we commit transactions that has a complete history of all the changes that were made. So in order to recover to a point in time, all we got to do is read the most recent snapshot before that point in time, and then play the log files back to that point in time. That's the requested recovery point. We do not have to read the blobs in. Those will be read on demand when you start to query your data, and then cached locally on the cluster once they've been read. So now I'd like to do a little demo. So you may know that if you type that command, delete from customer semicolon, it will run, and what will it do? It will delete every row in the customer table. And so it's kind of, if you accidentally forget your where clause because you're tired or you just, you didn't think for a second, this is the kind of thing that a customer may accidentally do. So I'm getting a phone call. Hang on. Hello? Oh, Micah?
Hey, Eric.
Yes?
I've got a problem. I was hoping I could get your help. I typed delete from customer and I forgot to put a where clause, and now I think all the data's gone. Do you think there's any way we can get it back?
Yeah, I think I can get that back for you. Okay. So what's the name? Let me see. I think this is your cluster that I'm logged on to. So is it the sales database?
Yeah.
Okay. So you deleted everything from customer, huh?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's not good. There's no rows in customer. So, okay, line item, that's a big table that still has data in it. So it just looks like customer got wiped out. What's the time that was right before you deleted the rows from customer?
So I did it in the afternoon. I think the last time that it would have been all the data would have been there before I dropped everything. It's probably around maybe 4:59 and 38 seconds on December the 7th.
Okay. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna detach that database, and this will take a few seconds, but then when that's done, I'll reattach it at that time. So what this is gonna do is gonna load the most recent snapshot before that time, and then play the log back up to that time to a transaction consistent state. And hopefully that will get us your customer records back. Should just take a few more seconds. Okay. So you can see customer tables there. Let's see if it's got data. All right, looks like your data's back.
Wow, you're a lifesaver. This is amazing.
Okay, great. There you go. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
All right. So that So we're happy that we got a chance to talk to you today to talk about the fall announcement and the new capabilities, including point-in-time recovery in particular, which is really going to be great and enable a lot of people to use SingleStore for mission-critical workloads, and tell you about the new additions. So here's some additional resources. Let me show you another slide here. So you can check out our documentation, engage with your peers on the SingleStore forum. You can watch our YouTube channel, youtube.com/SingleStore. Check out our training.singlestore.com, and feel free to get started today with SingleStore Managed Service. It's the easiest way to get started, and you can get $500 in free credits. So by just going to singlestore.com/manage-service-trial. So please check it out today. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike and Eric. Eric and Micah, appreciate it. We have a few questions that have come in, so I think we can kick off the Q&A session. And as a reminder, folks, the Q&A function is in the lower right-hand corner of the GoToWebinar console. So if you have questions, feel free to add that in, and we can try and cover those now. Okay. So first question, Eric, is for the point-in-time restore, can it be done on a table level?
Not currently. It works on a database level today, but that's definitely something that we architected the system to accommodate handling table level point-in-time restore. And so at a future date, I think you may see that from us.
Awesome, fantastic. Another question: does snapshot creation process impact the performance?
No, we've always taken snapshots. Like, whenever enough data changes, we take a snapshot of the in-memory row store state and write that out to disk, and it's completely asynchronous, and it's designed to not overwhelm the system. It just uses like background cycles, so it's really not noticeable.
Fantastic. I have another question. Was the historical monitoring solution improved as part of the latest release or the 7.6 release?
The historical monitoring solution. So, I think talk a little bit about monitoring. Yeah, so our monitoring has a couple different components. We've got some data that gets pulled out of the engine, and then we can display that in our telemetry tool called Studio, or we also have the ability to plug into some of the customer's infrastructure. So if you're running Prometheus and building Grafana dashboards, you can plug in that way. The way that we deliver enhancements to the monitoring is through a couple different components. We have functionality that we've built into the exporter, which is what kind of grabs the data from the engine and pushes that out to Prometheus or out to Studio. And so we're constantly kind of adding to which data we're collecting in that exporter. And we can share some more details in terms of the current state of that. We also have some documentation on SingleStore.com that kind of runs through what's available there. And then we have enhancements that we've been making in Studio and in our portal for our cloud managed service to the monitoring capability. So maybe if you want to reach out to the team, or if you want to take a look at our docs page, we can share some more details on what we've enhanced there. But we do those enhancements continuously, and they're not tied to a specific engine release. So you don't have to wait for a new version of engine to get some of the new monitoring enhancements that we're putting in the product.
Fantastic. Thank you, Micah. Hey, a couple of other questions. Is separation of storage and compute or bottomless storage feature included as part of the premium edition?
So separation, storage, and compute, this is the unlimited storage databases feature, also known as bottomless. That is available in standard edition and in premium edition both. The thing that's only available in premium is point-in-time restore. So if you want to do point-in-time, you want to recover to a point in time, you need to be using premium. You can detach and attach databases in standard edition, and that'll bring you to the latest time, but you can't go back to a point in time in the past.
Gotcha.
And the rationale for that is that we're making the premium edition the edition for mission critical applications, and point in time restore is a mission critical enabler.
Exactly. So one related question to that is, any idea when GCP unlimited storage will be available? It's currently looks like it's in preview. Any idea, Micah, on when GCP?
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah. Yeah, so unlimited storage is going to be available on GCP on February 1st. And if you're interested in trying it out as a private preview, go ahead and reach out to us, and we can give you some more details on how to evaluate that. But that's something that we're very excited about.
Fantastic.
And by the way, it's working again on Azure and AWS today. The demo I gave today was actually doing a point-in-time restore on Azure.
Great, and customers are already using it today, and the GCP one is going to be out Feb 1st. So great. How much memory can be used in each of the versions?
That's a really good question. I think so SingleStore, we decided that not to have any scale limits on standard edition. So you can use as much memory as you want in standard edition or in premium edition. Now, if you compare that to some competing products, like for example, SQL Server has scale limits on their standard edition, like how many cores you can have and how much memory you can have. We don't have that. So if you got like a purely analytical application that's not mission critical, then you don't need resource governor because it's not, maybe doesn't have really demanding concurrency requirements, then standard is probably a great choice, no matter how big the data is.
Great, thank you, Eric. So there's a follow-on question. So remember the earlier question regarding historical monitoring solution. Tanu just confirming, saying that my question is about Grafana dashboards. Micah, anything you can add to that?
Yeah, so we support Grafana dashboards for customers that are kind of connecting and configuring them. If there's specific dashboard templates that you're looking for, or specific data that you want to make sure that we have in the system and the exporter to be able to visualize, reach out, and those are things that we can definitely set up some time and walk through with you.
Great, yeah, Tanu, so feel free to reach out. Happy to schedule a session for you. I have one more question here, folks. If you have other questions, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, there's one last question here, which is when defining resource pools on Resource Governor, you can specify roles or just users. So I think the question is, when defining resource pools on Resource Governor, can you specify roles or is it just users?
Hanson, do you know the specifics on kind of the user access to those pools? Is it connections or how? So
you have to have, I believe you have to have permission to use a pool. I think it's by, I'm not really sure of the answer to that. We can look that up. I think it's just by users, not roles. But a user has to have permission to use a pool, and then you put their connection in that pool when they log on, and that defines the resources they can use. But we can double check.
Send us an email on that, and if there's an enhancement there that would be helpful, we can go ahead and create a request for that and work with our engineering team to prioritize it.
Great, fantastic. So looks like that's all the questions we have for today. I really want to thank Eric and Micah for a great presentation and a demo and an interactive discussion. So thank you, Eric and Micah. And thank you all for joining. And as mentioned, you will get a follow-up email with today's recording and link to our managed services free trial as well. As we mentioned before, we are offering each user $500 in free credit, so you can get started on a full workload today. You can try it out for free by going to singlestore.com/managed-service trial. This marks the end of today's webinar, and do join us for more other upcoming webinars. You can find that more on singlestore.com/events. We have a number of interesting webinars coming up, so definitely do join us. Thank you once again all for joining us, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.